We're diving deep into the rabbit hole, scrolling through TikToks that echo Darius's words, exposing the world's deception and revealing truths that align with the other side. Let's see just how deep this goes. At the very least, this might give you some rabbit holes to explore on your own. Remember when Darius talked about the number 12, supposed to be 13 in relation to a lot of things? Well, one of them was the months.
Months are not a proper unit of time, are they? A month is either 28, 29, 30 or 31 days long. In common parlance, we talk about a month being 4 weeks long, but they're not. Only February is exactly 4 weeks long, and even then, that's only true 3/4 of the time. 94% of months are longer than a month. We know exactly how many seconds in a minute, how many minutes in an hour, hours in a day, and days in a week. We even know exactly how many months in a year. But the months themselves are a mystery. They chop and change. Let me give you an example. Human pregnancy. We've all learned this all our lives. We all know how many months are we told an average human pregnancy should last? 9. Very good. 9 months. Now, parents, how many weeks were you told on average your pregnancy would last? 40. 40 weeks is 10 bloody months, isn't it? You spend your whole life as a woman thinking if you get pregnant it'll be 9 months, and then you get there and you discover it's actually 10. You've been conned, haven't you? Let's look at the year. How many months are there in a year? 12. Exactly. How many weeks are there in a year? 52. Good. However, 12 times 4 is 48, and 52 minus 4 is 48. Doesn't take a genius to work out we've got 4 extra weeks. And what do 4 weeks make? A month. There are actually 13 months in a year. This is outrageous. This is absolutely outrageous. And I have a solution. I have reformed the calendar. Let me be clear. It is not just the lack of rigour that I have issue with. I have another issue with months, a linguistic one. These are the months as we know them today. Take a look at the word October. Oct. Think of all the other words you know beginning with oct. Octopus, octagon, octogenarian. Think of all the words you know beginning with dec. Decade, decimal, decathlon. You don't have to be the sharpest linguist out there to realise that sept, oct, nov, dec represents 7, 8, 9, 10. And yet we've put them in positions 9, 10, 11, 12. Why has that happened? I'll tell you why that's happened. It's because of the bloody Romans. Before that, we used to have months called quintilis and sextilis. It used to be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But then the Romans got all egotistical on us. They wanted to name 2 months after their emperors. They named months after Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar. Can you imagine the ego involved in naming a month after a human being? It's one thing naming it after a god. You know, you got January after Janus, that's okay. Mars gives you March, that's okay. I mean, if you believe in a god, why wouldn't you want to venerate them by naming something as fundamental as a period of time after them? That makes sense. But not an actual human being. Get your egos out of the game. That is ridiculous. Well, they have confused things by naming July and August so, and then everything got moved around at a later date.
Since we are all gods, I guess Julius and Augustus did name the months after gods. Remember the mud floods that Darius talks about? Well,
this is a sphinx that got covered in mud from Noah's flood. All these mud floods happened worldwide. It was the flood of Noah. You could see it push mud up over the Sphinx right here. It dried like concrete. The Sphinx is sitting on top of a whole entire temple right here. You can see where the sediment gets pushed up. Even on the steps, it came in sideways and mud wiped out this whole entire temple. These sphinxes are found all over the world, okay? Whether it's in Egypt, Greece, India. There's even one in the Grand Canyon. That's the Sphinx in Balo Christian that got flooded. This is the Sphinx in Egypt. This is the one sitting in the Grand Canyon. You can see the Sphinx had its head knocked off somewhere. It's probably buried behind it in sediment. That's a pyramid behind the Sphinx covered in mud. Okay? All these sphinxes and pyramids are sitting on top of that temples, the same temples that were in Balo Christian. See right here how that sphinx in Balo Christian is sitting on top of it. So that's going to be like your Greek and Roman ancient pillar columns right there that run across like a Colosseum. That's going to be another top of a temple right there. That's why when they excavated out the Sphinx in Egypt, they found all kinds of chambers and tunnels underneath because that Sphinx is sitting on top of a temple. You see, this whole area got flooded out, but it pushed sand up in Egypt instead of mud. This is all water damage on the surface right here. 3 generations of stonemasons. The first thing I was taught to see was water damage on a stone surface. This stuff deposited sediment so thick that nothing's going to grow through it for thousands of years, okay? That's why you only see small brush and shrub growing through it, because it's literally concrete that dried. At the top, that's a temple on the other side of the Sphinx in Pakistan, okay? This is all off the coast of Hingol National Park. Right here on the bottom, that's a temple in the next country over for reference, because that's what got flooded, was an ancient temple. They line up perfect.
Continuing with the evidence of the mud floods.
You've heard the theories. The old railroads were not laid, but they were dug up. Look at this big old pile of dirt. I can't help but notice all the pickaxes and shovels for digging. A pickaxe isn't a very useful hammer. Wait a minute, is this tunnel still half buried? Katya, where's that rail track going? Now I'm no scientist, but why is the dirt still flush and level with the railroad ties? Okay, looks like this one is in construction, but where is this railroad going? Into the dirt? Wait a minute, train cars full of dirt and a big old mound of dirt along the sides of the tracks? Reminds me of all these old world buildings that were dug out of the ground. Entire cities under entire cities. You ever wonder, why are there tops of windows on the ground? Yeah, tops of windows on the ground. Makes you wonder how tall these buildings really were. I watched a gentleman's video on this topic, and he said that the old westerns, it was always about constructing the railroad, as if they were programming it into the minds of the people. Oh, I've been working on the railroad all the live long day. They just didn't tell you that working on the railroad was taking big old mounds of dirt and displacing it to reveal tracks beneath.
When something is restricted, it's worth questioning why.
I sense there's something that is very significant about the western part of the United States. The desert, the Grand Canyon, the rock formations. You think even like Devil's Tower. I think it's in is that Wyoming?
Wyoming, yes.
Different rock formations. Like there's different parts like Arizona. It looks like it's been like a nuclear blast, like more than a nuclear blast. Like what did that? How did the rocks start to look like mushrooms?
And when you get up towards like northern Arizona, like on the way to Utah, there's a bunch of like the structures like you're talking about. Like there's barren land, and then it almost looks like ancient towers, like towers or cities that were like,
yeah, like if you look in, crazy thing about like the Grand Canyon is they have like the Temple of Isis, the Tower of Osiris. They have like another temple to Shiva, I think, in there. And it's like, they just said some guy just named it that for reasons. Of course. But it kind of does look like there's an entrance to the temple to Isis. Like, what is that place? And then you find out it's off limits. Okay. So now you start to get suspicious. Like, all right, okay, well, it's dangerous. It's like, well, people go missing in national parks every day, all day throughout the country.
Right.
So they're real worried they're going to go missing in the Grand Canyon for some reason.
Well, did you know that North America has more cave entrances into whatever you want to call that, whether you want to call it Hollow Earth, Middle Earth, whatever. North America has more entrances than any other continent.
Weren't people asking who's really running things behind the scenes? Well, here's a glimpse.
With the City of London. The City of London, not London. There are 14 roads go into the City of London. There's dragons on each side. The Rothschilds have an office there. The top 3 floors are always got the lights on. There's nothing ever going. Nobody can see anybody walking there. There's a wall around the Rothschild building. There's a church there that they claim that they used to drink babies from. Not anymore, but they used to. You stand outside their building. After 5 minutes, security comes and tells you to move on. What the is going on with the City of London?
Do you know that in the UK, there's a banking group, RBS, and they own NatWest and Coutts and Royal Bank of Scotland and Lloyds. They own all the banks. So yeah, there are families like the Rothschilds. In my book, Money Matrix, I mentioned the other powerful families who essentially control the world. And, you know, a lot of people naively think, well, you know, the Prime Minister or the President, you know, that's the top level of control, or the royalty. You've got silent private people above who pull the strings. Now, I don't actually know how they do it and who it is, and nor do you, and nor does anyone.
When Darius says no one can ever hurt or kill your soul, he means it. Because the truth is, your soul is eternal. Still, I wouldn't want to be experimented on, though.
John Blitch, his interview was fascinating.
What happened to him?
He believes that he was potentially abducted even as a child. He would see them outside his window just staring in. And then as an adult, said I would do this bike ride because the pressure of my job was just intense. This one bike ride, there are 5 hours unaccounted for. He said my wife called the police, and it's almost like I just like closed my eyes and opened them. And he's like, it was just a little darker outside. And he said he was the most tired he's ever been. And then he went into a gas station, chugged so much Gatorade, walked out, and the police were like, hey, are you John or whatever? He's like, yeah. He's like, okay, well, you've been missing. Your wife called in. They're concerned about you. Can we give you a ride home?
And he couldn't remember anything besides that. So
No. But then he talks about there was one night he was visited. He said the only way I could describe it was a giant praying mantis, but it could speak to me telepathically.
Tim Alvarino talked about him.
Yeah, he did.
Insectoland.
But he talked about this thing was speaking with him telepathically and basically along the lines of like, stop squirming, let us do our test. We can never hurt your soul.
Oh.
Then he woke up, said, I noticed on my arm 3 bruises inside my arm. Something had grabbed.
It just doesn't make sense.
Speaking of aliens, remember when Darius said the first ones revealed will be the ones that look exactly like us? Think this is foreshadowing?
And they tell you the truth, like always.
The alien ambassador's already here.
Whoa.
Not her. Him.
Hey, what's up, dude? You're an alien? All famous people are aliens. I'm not. I meant like really famous people.
It's just so obvious, I'll show you more in a second. But really quick, let me ask you this. Why is every Super Bowl, every Olympics, and any other main event always consumed by aliens? And of course they're showing the mantis aliens. Teen girl abducted by praying mantis aliens. And this right here was the first alien commercial for this Super Bowl. Look at his hand. Why would he do that? It's not rocket science, y'all. They're saying that all the famous people are alien because they're not of this earthly plane, but of this outer dimension. And you know, these white aliens are supposed to be the good aliens out of all the other aliens that help humanity. Kind of like, you know, when those fallen angels came down and helped humanity. And white trying to appear pure because, you know, Satan masquerades as an angel of light. Remember, like, Kendrick was surrounded by the people in white the entire time and they were the only ones left standing? Not everyone that looks human is human, and there's a great delusion coming, and they're straight up telling you. Remember Lil Wayne's I am not a human?
Or how about when I made a video about how space, the sun, the stars, and the moon aren't what they seem? Oh yeah, don't forget Antarctica.
Federal violation to be in possession of a moon rock, even the smallest particle. You are not allowed to have because you could put it under a microscope and maybe discover things about it. The fact is, Von Braun took an unusual holiday 6 weeks before they went to the moon for the first time. You would think he would be practically sleeping at NASA 24/7 to make sure everything worked for the first launch to the moon. But he had enough leisure time left over to make a trip to Antarctica, which is known for having a lot of lunar meteorites, and he collected a bunch of those rocks, and those were submitted as coming from the moon. And some of them are just, you know, false pieces of petrified wood that they assumed would never be opened. That's why it's a federal crime to be in possession of one, because you could prove that some of them are fake.
Remember in my last video when I talked about the tech they keep hidden? Well, do you think this will ever see the light of day? Johnson & Johnson will probably buy it and shelve it.
Scientists just made one of the biggest discoveries ever, and people are losing their minds. So you've probably heard of Hydrogel before, which, you know, if you used to play with Orbeez or anything like that, that's what it's made of. And there's many other things that it is used for. Now we all know the pain of getting a cut, or especially a bad injury or wound. What they do is they plaster it up, they bandage it up, and it's going to take quite a long time to heal, right? Depending on how bad the cut actually is, it can take anywhere from a month, 2 months, even up to a year if it's really, really bad. But scientists at the University of Bayreuth in Germany have just made one of the craziest discoveries ever, and I'm not joking when I say this is literally groundbreaking. What they've done is develop a hydrogel so advanced that it is paper thin, and somehow it mimics human skin. Yeah, in a number of ways such as flexibility and also taking on its healing capabilities. So this tiny thin sleeve that will be put on instead of like a bandage will now be able to heal wounds 90% in 4 hours and fully within a whole day, which is absolutely game-changing for the world. And once this becomes mainstream, when they've done more testing,
they're up to this too. Remember, when powerful people start losing money, they only become more deceptive.
Big Food just found a way to hack Ozempic, and they're doing it in secret. The story is actually crazy. Okay, so there's a food laboratory in Northern California called Matson that is, quote unquote, creating the future of food. It's run by this guy named Justin Shimmick, PhD. So you know he is a smart guy, and he has monetized his intelligence quite well. It says for nearly 50 years, Matson has conceptualized, developed, branded, and scaled hundreds of product lines, and in the process created billions of dollars in revenue for clients. And right now, their clients, Big Food, is asking them to do experiments that will reformulate ingredients so that their food can bypass the effects of Ozempic, Wegovy, and other GLP-1 weight loss drugs. Because from a financial perspective, people on these weight loss drugs are buying less food. Walmart CEO John Fernand recently told Bloomberg News that the company is seeing signs that people taking GLP-1 agonist appetite suppressant medications are buying, quote, less units, slightly less calories, which equals less profit. New York Times has reported that sales are down in sweet baked goods and snacks, and the industry is weathering a downturn. That's a big problem for these food executives. So in response, the food companies are designing what they call GLP-1 optimized products. In layman's terms, they're trying to make the food more addictive, even more addictive than they already are, because we know that food is already pretty addictive.
How about the things they've grown and covered up?
I mean, we have grown human-animal chimeras already. You have a creature that's part human and part animal. A lot of this research is not necessarily being published because it's ethically controversial, and a lot of the people that are working on it don't necessarily want public blowback. This is being done especially here in California. We're not breeding a human with an animal to get something in the middle. We're actually creating an entity that has some body parts that are pig or sheep or whatever, and other body parts that are human. We have grown animals that are pretty close to having potentially viable human organs. Theoretically, could we develop an animal that had a much more human-like brain? It seems plausible.
Humanizing the
human. What are we to make of this creature? Questions about the human soul. I think we're tinkering with systems that we barely understand. And I think the possibility of creating more human-like animals is a real one that cannot be dismissed. I'm not a vegetarian. I do eat pigs, but I don't believe it's just okay to do anything and everything I want to a pig before I slaughter it to make some bacon. The ethical treatment of animals is also an important consideration.
Oh yeah, the government has been cloud seeding and manipulating the weather since Woodstock.
Hey, Governor DeSantis. Today, when I got up in St. Petersburg, it was clear blue sky, and I started watching all the planes spraying. Now, I know that FAA knows who's flying. I'm pretty sure the governor can figure out who's flying and spraying and creating these fake clouds in the sky. Look. I even got footage of that plane spraying. So, Governor of Florida and Florida officials, what are we doing about this? And why don't you start explaining exactly what it is? Clear blue sky. Look at all the lines from the planes. I watched them all, and some of them stop spraying after a while and they restart. Can we have an explanation?
Don't worry. I'm not gonna do what everyone thinks I'm gonna do. Flip out, man.
The government is really good at running smear campaigns. Really good.
I mean, first, the hippie movement probably was to co-opt the anti-war movement that was pretty buttoned up. Like, yes. I suspect that LSD did not just escape the lab. I suspect they were like, quick, turn all these kids into crazy hippies. Like, try this out, try this out, try this out. Check this out. Have you read Strange Scenes Inside Laurel Canyon?
I started to read it. I have not finished it.
If you take that book's premise, it's basically that before the hippie movement, there was a very powerful organized anti-war movement led by a bunch of Quakers, a bunch of black activists, a bunch of, like, my dad was one of them. And it was not this hippie fringe thing. It was a very powerful anti-Vietnam protest. And the moment that LSD gets introduced, it becomes all peace and love. And he points out in that book how all of these people, like Frank Zappa, like lead members of the Doors, people organizing the Monterey Pop Festival, they all just happen to move from wherever they are all over the world into this area in LA that is not a hotbed for music. And they all just start making music about peace and love and doing LSD. And all of them have parents that are from special forces, intelligence operations, Pentagon,
like
overseas.
Who in specific?
Like the lead singer of the Doors, Jim Morrison, for example. Frank Zappa's dad worked at the base that was like the chemical weapons, like where they did their chemical weapons research. His dad was a chemical weapons specialist with like top secret clearances, which is basically like, when you read about what his dad was, it sounds a lot like what MK Ultra would be.
This UFO looks like it's having a cloaking issue. This one's probably reverse engineered. I'll leave you with the craziest one yet. This exposes what the 1%ers of the world have access to, and it also reveals another secret we were told would be crazy to believe.
Ever in my life did I ever think this was real. But people, we are going to talk about mermaid eating parties. Crazy. I've watched a few videos and I've looked into it, and it's disturbing. So this is all alleged. But supposedly there was a man that worked for some very elite 1%ers out in LA. And they wanted exotic fish. You know, fish like swordfish, that kind of deal. Anywho, these elites are like, we like you. So he gets invited to a dinner. He's like pumped, right? Like, hell yes. So he goes to this massive mansion, right? And goes into this dinner. And he notices all these big windows just overlooking the ocean. What he really notices is this massive 5-foot platter in the middle of this dining room table. Now, around this table is a bunch of just, regular food. Now, remember what I said, allegedly. They go and open it up, and it's a mermaid. Dude's like, it's a mermaid. He's looking around the room. People's jaws are dropping to the ground. Other people are like, hey, no big deal. They just start eating it. This guy's just like, can't differentiate what is actually happening. He's like the people with the mouths on the floor. So kind of fight or flight, he runs. And he's trying to get out of this mansion. It's a huge mansion. He's like looking all over the place. Finds his way like into this like corridor into a room, and they are these massive fish tanks. And he goes up close to these fish tanks, and literally mermaids swim up to him. And the scary, weird, sad part about it all is he said they were like aware of him. They were aware of why they were there. Now, as this all happens, a butler walks in and goes, yeah, hey, looks like you found the pantry. And then eventually escorted the guy out of the mansion. I want to so badly not believe this, but it is so autical. And I have read so much and seen so many videos. We don't know what these elites can do and what they're capable of and what they can get. But just imagine being that guy. It's like a great plot for a movie. I hope it gets picked up.
The deeper we go, the more the corruption and deception become clear, and it all lines up with what Darius has been saying. If you found this content eye-opening, hit that like button. It not only helps spread the truth, but also helps the algorithm get this out to more people. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.